In what way do you see that Web2 potentially went wrong that serves the need for Web3 to come in to improve on that? And what are the biggest challenges with today's digital ecosystem? Do you want to go first?
When you look at the evolution of internet, like Web2 hold a lot of promises. At the beginning, like the idea that anyone could contribute by sharing text, posting on blogs, posting photos, videos, and making like a website more interesting, always with fresh content, contributing from anywhere. It's been very exciting and a great natural evolution. However, what it led to progressively, it's toward like more centralization of the platform with a few winners that take all the market. Those platforms, we are familiar with them, like they are Facebook, the Instagram, the TikTok of the world. They concentrated a lot of data, and progressively, the more users contributed, the more it kept like growing the platform, which ultimately like held all the user data. So essentially, anything that you contribute to as a creator, as a user to those social network or platform doesn't really belong to you. You don't own the picture, you don't own the video, you don't own the social graph that you created. And hence, like, not only you cannot use it anywhere else, it is like those platforms are trying to lock you in and try by any means to capture your attention so you do not move across other applications, creating a very negative environment for innovation, a very competitive environment. Plus, well, you were very inclined to spend money like on those platforms. Or if you're not spending money, like you are actually being the product being monetized. Meaning like they are using your data, they are profiling you based on your different tastes, and through AI-based algorithm that suggests you content, they can feel which are your interest topics so they can better target you with advertising. I feel like it really drove toward like a much poorer user experience overall, where like most of the internet is being driven by ad advertising and poorer content because creators actually don't get a fair part of the revenue that advertising or other revenue being generated by the platform. And anything that the user contributed isn't really belonging to them, so they cannot start selling them on other platforms, etc. So in a nutshell, like Web2 really created this environment where like you are being deprived of your own data, even though you are essentially the workforce that contributed to make those big platforms that popular. What Web3 solves, in a sense, is giving back the power into the hand of the user instead of the platform that hosts their content. And this is thought in a way that it can drive much more positive incentive for all actors of the chain, the platform, the creators, the users, so that you can build a whole new layers of application. Often we say like bricks of application, where like actually the application in Web3 are not competing with each other. Actually, they are supporting each other by network effect, because now like users can move seamlessly across the different applications, which creates a much, I would say, better environment for everyone.
Overall, I think just the importance of everything has been growing. It's actually becoming a big risk for us as a society even, where if you think about the discussion of like TikTok in the US right now, the discussion was all focused on like, is TikTok spying on my home Wi-Fi? And that's not the danger for anyone, but there's a black box algorithm that educates 100 million people about news and what to think about politics and a lot of other things that nobody can actually audit and see like where is that data coming from. And at the same time, like a very concrete example was one of the reasons we founded Phaver in a Web3 way was my grandmother was an avid Facebook user, especially during COVID when she was not allowed to go outside. The government told old people to be indoors, and she had built a strong network of friends all around the world, like Midwestern housewives from the US. They were trading pictures of flowers and a very wholesome interaction until one day she tried to hide her birthday from her Facebook page, accidentally moved her age to be 12, got kicked out of Facebook and Instagram, 10 years of social connections, history, grandchildren's photos, everything wiped out in an instant, and I tried to do my best to help her get them back. We sent her magazine subscription bills, her passport, and everything again, very invasive, had to send all of these to Facebook customer support. We never got any of that back.
Wow.
So that's just a reminder that in Web2, you can build your entire social life on something that you don't own and you have no control, no veto rights on. And I think these two things kind of overall not allowing a couple of companies to decide what's allowed to be discussed and what are the daily trending topics, which actually has been already affecting elections around the world. And the other part being that if actually a major part of your social life and your life in general is online, you should be owning that. You should be able to monetize that fairly. You should be able to take it with you across different platforms. And that's kind of the problem with Web2, where like essentially the web has become too important for users to not have ownership of stuff that might be a majority of their life.
Yeah, yeah. Leo, I'm going to direct this next question to you. How does Web3 technology mark a transformative change in the landscape of digital interactions? What are the key features of Web3 that truly distinguish it from the Web2 model?
I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with Web2.
Yeah.
I think it's a natural progression of technology tool.
Yeah.
So I think at the time, it was just impossible to be able to do things so efficiently. And that's why, okay, having the entire stack in one place makes a lot of sense. So even if 10, 15 years ago, where magically we offer, the smart contracts were available, the ability to offer this very decentralized stack in front of end users was possible. The behavior pattern, the amount of data that's required to establish the kind of pricing awareness was not even there. So I think it wasn't really, okay, the civilization was at the crossroad and we were presented with Web2, Web3, and we chose Web2 and we chose wrong. I think it's just, okay, at this point we have many things that become quantifiable. We have more things, and because they're more quantifiable, they require better price discovery. They require better mechanism to whether to define ownership or decide who controls which part of the generation process and why, which naturally create the need for more nuanced, more granular, I guess, control, transfer, pricing ability of everything that goes into the stack. And I think back to the original question of why is transformative, I think it's more of it's transformative in the sense that, okay, now we have enough of a foundation from previously using social-based or just technology that had benefited a lot from much more efficient communication tools. Mm-hmm. And now we're able to give more people the ability to do all these things that is not possible.
Yeah. Tian, can you explain for us the benefits and the challenges with both centralization and decentralization?
I think in just typically with centralization, the risk that associates with centralization is a single point of failure. Mm-hmm. So that is naturally, I think, when we're evaluating the pros and cons of decentralization and centralization, that naturally comes to top of mind. And we've seen with a couple of incidents, especially in the financial sector, just how a single institution, the failure of it could result in like massive ripple effect across another sector beyond just the finance. So this is really where I think like decentralizing the decentralization solutions and technologies can bring about a change that is quite refreshing. And in some sense, I think personally, I got more involved in crypto because I think it offers a proposition that is unlike any other solutions that we've come across. Because if we're just looking at the centralized sector, just looking at finance, like the financial sector specifically, right? In the past, cost of money transfer has probably come down, but it's still largely a result of innovation at the business model, business level. But with crypto and Web3 technologies, it allows for the same kind of proposition, but at a significantly less cost compared to the predecessors. So I think from that perspective, yeah, if we're just looking at pros and cons perspective, centralized, decentralized, I think that is probably one of the more apparent like narrative.
Yeah.
In regards to, I guess, like the downside of decentralized technologies, it's probably just coordination. So it comes at, there is a cost. If things are very decentralized, a lot of people actually has a say in a certain direction. And we've seen this with a lot of the DAO proposals, sometimes because stakeholders have an outsized influence, they can persuade the communities to vote in the direction that they desire, but might not necessarily be the most optimal direction for the protocol. So yeah, these are things that I think we will come to realize and appreciate more as we see more of such occurrence. But I think ultimately it's just a balancing of centralization and decentralized, centralizing, and see like whichever model that makes sense to a specific use case.
Yeah. So speaking of decentralization versus centralization, why do you think that self-sovereign identity is so essential for our future? Anyone can take this.
I like to tell stories, and there's a lot of concrete learnings. I was actually in a panel in Paris talking about DIDs and the importance of that a couple of months ago. And I was showing us an example that actually, like even before we get to the point of actual decentralized IDs becoming government verified and genuinely usable, which has a lot of upsides, because do you actually want to show your passport to every single exchange you KYC into, every single unknown entity out there? It's a very bad privacy practice and a big risk that there's tons of people having your full identification all around the world. So starting from that, but then in Finland we've solved that with online banking credentials being used as part of the government authorization. So if I go to the government tax website or social security website, I authenticate with my online banking credentials, which is all well and good. There's 6-7 banks in Finland, so it's easy to have full coverage. Then actually one of our team members told me a week ago that because she lives abroad nowadays, she had been contacted by her bank in Finland saying that actually you no longer get to be our customer because you're no longer living in Finland. Therefore, we're going to be killing your online banking access. Therefore, we are without warning killing your access to all of your government services as a citizen of Finland. Wow. And that's, again, the point of failure point. If we give our trust to centralized parties, in this case, a few banks, it's all well and good until it's not. So if we really want to do decentralized identification, it has to be in a way where no single party can decide that, okay, we no longer want you as our customer and cutting you off from your government access, for example. Yeah. So I think from an identification perspective, that's a key part for your social media identity. Obviously, all of us realize that it's very annoying that you have 10 different identities in different Sandbox platforms out there. And instead of bringing those identities into somehow a combined set, so you wouldn't have to have your Facebook friends and your Instagram followers and your LinkedIn connections and your Twitter followers, and each one of them is owned by those platforms, and you can't really cross-pollinate in any reasonable way. So the identity and the social life is also great and convenient, but on a more fundamental level, it actually infringes on your rights as a citizen if it's not done correctly.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, I think the interesting aspect about DID and now what's coming up, account abstraction, is the ability first to add a lot more intelligence around how we connect with different applications, turning potentially an NFT into a full smart contract wallet that can connect differently to different applications and trigger new interaction. Also the fact that you can choose which part of the information is going to be shared with which service. So you don't necessarily need to share your date of birth, for example, to prove your address. You just have a verification that you're above age, and that could work for a lot of services. So keeping in mind privacy and respecting privacy much more. Yeah. I think something that a lot of public institutions and government are really aware now, how your identity should not be shared fully around the private sector, and they can implement solutions that will also be more respectful of that for their own citizens. I like also to think from the perspective of like what the metaverse is. Like in the metaverse, your identity is essentially an avatar, a 3D character that's a representation of yourself. So you can actually have multiple avatars and NFTs, so you can choose who you want to be. You're kind of like reborn in the metaverse. And I also like that idea that you can be reborn. So it's not something that you inherit from the country you are born and comes up with a whole package of whatever, like the political situation, the finance situation of the country, etc. But you get to have access maybe to new opportunities, new jobs that doesn't depend on actually where you're born, which education you receive, which community you're part from, etc. And that's, I think, something that can be very empowering for more population around the world.
How does Web3 and particularly DeFi create new opportunities for investors and correct some of the inequities built into current financial platforms? Tien, do you want to take that one?
I think DeFi offers very unique opportunities for a lot of users in the sense that it democratizes access to a lot of these financial instruments that were probably a lot harder to access if in the current setup. Case in point, like if I want to get access to treasury bills, I probably have to treasury bill like in another country. I'll have to go through some intermediaries. That is, I guess, like the more straightforward financial product. But if we're looking at options or derivatives, those are a lot more difficult for retail users with no background in finance or businesses, and then even more so if they're not accredited investors. So I think the DeFi lowers that participation barrier. And then beyond that, there's also a lot of effort in trying to improve the user experience, to try to simplify the entire onboarding process. So it's not just getting access to the product per se. I mean, right now, if I'm a typical retail user and I want to get access to a DeFi options, I can do so quite easily. But comparatively, I think the user experience of an options product on-chain is comparable or has a better user experience than, say, like a conventional product. Not directly an apple-to-apple comparison, but I think like it's just like a very different kind of product proposition. And I think the whole UX stems from the perspective of, say, mostly retail. So because of all these different kind of propositions, I feel that it has allowed a set of users with relatively limited access to financial products in the TradFi sense to get access to wealth-generating avenues. And if they're capable and competent, they would be able to find opportunities and generate wealth that they wouldn't have otherwise.
So I think DeFi, beyond the accessibility, which is very, very important, it's a much more efficient system. It's much more efficient, right? So it's the standardized technology stack across all different types of markets, and it's very easy for you to take your assets from one type of market and interact with a completely different type of markets. And this is very difficult to do with traditional markets with very clear gatekeepers. I think it's innovative in the sense that, okay, there is massive cost reduction in terms of, okay, the frictions involved in making transactions, making price discoveries, but the problem is, so far it's not fully being reflected yet. And this is mostly just have to do with like continuous improvement of wallet UX and just on-chain experience in general. But I think the flatness of DeFi presents a very significant opportunity for whether it's end users or infrastructures that rely on certain kind of like market-based solutions to use this type of tools very easily.
DeFi has also contributed a lot toward like democratization of finance and education in general. So like a lot more users, which typically will not be exposed to this kind of product in the traditional finance, centralized finance system, would kind of learn more about the opportunity, the different type of digital assets that can be accessed, and potentially be uplifted from the life condition from that.
Mm-hmm. So we can look to the dynamic industries of gaming and social media and see so many developing Web3 platforms and projects. As some of the biggest business categories in the world, how will these verticals benefit from Web3 and what are their challenges?
Our mission is to kind of bring together all of the consumer applications of Web3, so all of your NFTs, your identifications, your social graphs. So we follow this kind of landscape very carefully. And I was in Korea last week for KBW, and I think like Korea is one of the best examples of like countries where this is already happening, where the big companies are coming into Web3. So Lotte Group, for example, one of our partners, is a huge conglomerate, and they've been launching their own NFT collections that actually have like loyalty card benefits in their department stores and other assets. And instead of a boring card in your wallet, you have a cute teddy bear belly gum in your crypto wallet. And there's these kind of like fan NFT projects coming for a lot of K-pop bands where if you're a super fan, you can mint an exclusive badge. And I think there's overall, for actual consumer adoption of NFTs and Web3 in general, we need to have things that people really want to do, and then they're willing to go and create their wallet. Just telling them that this is an NFT, you should own one, is not going to cut it. But if their favorite artist tells them that, hey, if you want to be closer to me, now there's an exclusive membership badge that you can get by creating this wallet here and then adding it in there. That's going to be hundreds of millions of people moving with their favorite artists, for example. And what actually will be kind of big for this, and what we're betting on, is that since NFTs are interoperable, it's just going to be like kind of the moment as an artist you get your fans to own an asset that you created for them, whether it's free or paid. That means that you have that direct connection with your fan base, with your user base anywhere. So for us, for example, that's going to mean that then if you have one of these K-pop fan NFTs, we can automatically merge you with fellow fans of the same artist on Phaver. You can join an exclusive community for those people. Or if you have a POAP from an event, we can like combine the people who went to the same event so they can trade contact details afterwards. And all of this stuff can be done on Phaver, but it can be done by anybody else as well, because all of this data is publicly accessible. So that's just gonna like hypercharge the consumer innovation and experience, I think, to a completely new level, where all of a sudden your restaurant reviews are no longer stuck in Foursquare, but if you use the decentralized version of that, you can actually use those across multiple platforms. And the artists can directly reach their folks on a dozen different platforms. And in general, I think kind of getting this access between different parties, whether it's a musician or a creator or a brand, and their followers, fans, customers, that can actually be then matched anywhere, I think is going to be a big game changer for both parties, because that's going to be, if you're a fan, you want to be connected in multiple different places and showcasing that loyalty and fandom. If you're a customer, you want to be rewarded in multiple different places without complicated email back and forth processes and the kind of broken Web2 integration chain.
If you look at like what's been the gaming industry for almost 15 years, like there's been very little innovation in the kind of gameplay that are being launched. And the business model has been essentially the following. So the video game industry by itself is around $160 billion revenue, is still poised to grow. But most of the developers, they would actually earn a revenue through free-to-play, which is essentially trying to convert 1% to 3% of users to make an in-app purchase, buying virtual currencies or items with real money to get content, while the rest of users will be monetized through advertising, essentially like giving up the user data toward a centralized platform so they can be targeted with product and services advertisement. And that's essentially a very bad, very negative model for the industry, both for the innovation first, because the developers, creators take less risk. They want to maximize the output of the formula CPI versus LTV to make sure the games are like successful financially. It drives the idea that basically anything you buy in those games doesn't belong to you either. So we've seen so many games being shut down, so many games where like the accounts were closed and you lost all your content, even though you spent real money, and all the fact you couldn't exchange with other users. And we all know that users, again, like don't like ads, and they are the product being monetized. So what NFTs and Web3 brought is essentially to create models where but those games do not need to rely only on free-to-play, but can try to invent a new model. We don't know yet what that exact model will be. There's been a lot of iteration. Like a year ago, it was free-to-play or play and earn. Sorry, it was play and earn or play to earn, and all the variants of whatever to earn model. You name it. It has shown it has grown really rapidly. So it also showed like, oh wow, games can become like more than just a single product. They became platform, which can involve guilds, that can involve multiple actors and players and creators, etc. And it can drive like financial incentive on top of what a game used to be, which has been very powerful. Very fast, like we've seen the limit of the model where the rewards come only from one source. Like that's what drove like the decline of certain games that were not necessarily creating a full virtuous circle of the creator economy with external influx of money that's not only coming from the player buying their own assets. And it also shows that we can invent together a model of future of gaming with taking into account like user-generated content, contribution of users, and make the users be the first who will get rewarded for the value they contribute. So I'm really, as the president of the Blockchain Game Alliance, we see 600 members. The organization has kept growing. We keep seeing innovation, new models, testing different approach, focusing on the utility, focusing on the interoperability before even trying to sell a token or doing a pre-sale of NFT to develop a game. And it's exciting after spending 15 years in the traditional gaming industry to see how fast things are iterating now in this space, thanks to that.
I do think these are absolutely important areas to bring new generation of users and normal users too. I think obviously there's a lot of questions around, okay, whether the experiences can be just as smooth or even better than what they generally experience. Because that's the entry point before we can offer any kind of, okay, returning the control of data or returning any kind of like ability to trade whatever content that you've been generating in a more appropriate manner. That makes sense.
This last question is, how are communities using decentralized tools to reimagine collective action, investment, and creative collaboration?
I think one of the more interesting ideas that I've come about recently, right, is a fusion of like some sort of a GameFi and real-world asset. So they're basically creating an incentive structure to encourage certain activities outside of just the digital world. And I mean, for example, right, like let's just say like Pendle is trying to get more visibility in Raffles City. So what we can do is we can set up a campaign to incent some activities there. So get some people to design stickers and then paste it all over the place. Not the best mode of action for this particular use case, but I think it serves a use case where we can very quickly aggregate interests from a very specific group of users and then align interests and get certain actions done. So I think, I'm not too sure about this particular use case and whether it exists. I think it probably will appear at some point in time, just given how we have already witnessed something like StepN, where you can utilize crypto to try to encourage certain kind of physical activities and then incent that activities. So something like Sebastien talked about, XX to earn. This is, I think, an evolution of a similar kind of model. Also very, very closely aligned to just the fundamentals of crypto.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think kind of as a case example, kind of what Phaver is doing with our like upcoming token and things related to that is that obviously we're trying to kind of build social media in the right way And kind of when we first founded the company, we wrote on the first value as net positive impact. So it's not enough to just don't be evil, which Google seems to always forget as well. But you actually have to do something that has a positive impact, and that's what we're trying to do. And with tokens, there's obviously a lot of very shady and very scammy use cases for tokens, but in the best case scenario, I think they're actually a novel way to really kind of bring your community in as kind of real stakeholders. So already kind of the idea is that since we use Lens Protocol and CyberConnect to give people control over their social profile, that means that since they are the owners of their profiles, and if we treat them badly, they can go away and take that profile away from Phaver, then they actually are stakeholders instead of just like monetizable eyeballs like they would be in Web2. And then that also means that we need to reward those stakeholders fairly if we want to keep them in Phaver, because otherwise they can go elsewhere. And kind of with this whole premise of if we give users control over their own assets, then we have to treat them in a way where they will want to stay on Phaver instead of going to a competing platform that will treat them better. And that's where the tokens come into play. There's obviously been a lot of kind of token incentive structures that have kind of led to a lot of airdrop farming and all of these like problematic behaviors. But what Phaver has been trying to kind of pilot for the last year and a half on the sort of Web2 side of our app, so with Phaver points that are not on-chain, trying to figure out like how do we actually create a gamified reward mechanism where those social media users who are creating, curating, or moderating the content in ways that genuinely creates value, so not just farming and posting like copy-paste stuff. Like how do we like single those folks out, reward them fairly, and then build a token economy where not only does the kind of value of the tokens they've been earning grow over time as the platform grows, hopefully, but also where there's enough actual value generated in the app that there's people who want to advertise using those tokens, there's people who want to boost their own visibility using those tokens, premium features, premium content, and all of these things that kind of people are willing to pay fiat currencies for. So how do we build something that's not built on Ponzi-nomics and is not going to be collapsing in 6 months because you're not actually generating value? The big problem with X to earn is that most of the X so far has not been generating any real value for anyone. So it's great that you go running, your fitness improves, but who else benefits from that? And games, if like obviously it might be fun to play against someone, but not probably fun enough that that person wants to pay you to play against them. So we need to figure out what are these drivers that actually create value in that exchange, and then we can build kind of sustainable token reward systems. And I think that's where like DeFi itself is kind of like it's great that we get to invest in options, but that's also very scary and very dangerous because most people have no idea how to do that and will probably lose all of their money. But if we rather use tokens in a way where we bring that ownership and sort of like reward mechanism for the people who were there from the get-go, who are helping you grow, who have been unpaid in Web2, so like the Reddit moderators, the Instagram creators, the YouTube video creators who get a small share, but in many cases get nothing. I think that's where like there's a huge kind of mass market potential to do something like also ethically sustainable with essentially a DeFi structure. So building that reward mechanism where anybody can cash out their tokens anywhere in the world with like accordance to local regulations, local exchanges and off-ramps and all that. So we can also support a global audience instead of having to build every single country's like monetization separately.
Leo?
Yeah, so I think Tian touched this point earlier about, okay, not necessarily every part have to be, so some parts, they benefit being centralized and some parts are better to be decentralized, right? So maybe, you know, this is going to offend like 10 people who really care about this, but like searcher builders, they don't necessarily need to be so decentralized compared to the set of validators. And I think the ability to, and over time, of course, like we want more things to be structured more decentralized, right? In like sequences probably can be a little bit more decentralized. But the premise is that all these nodes have to be able to get coordinated. And the underlying ability to do that is still very much advancements in cryptography. It's still very much advancements in mechanism designs. So I think, you know, it's definitely wonderful that we're unlocking a lot of new behaviors that average people are able to participate. But it's mostly just a combination of money plus social media rather than decentralization itself.
I think it really goes into like pushing through new innovation, new research of models, desire to change a bit the status quo of what we've seen before and what we somehow, because like you said, the evolution of technology didn't allow us before to have a choice, but now we have a choice. So how can we make meaningful decision of like, why do we decentralize? What kind of value do we give to the user? Is it a value that is going to be limited in time, like just one event, just one concert, one physical merch I can claim, or is going to progressively grow over time because it's meant to be like driven into engagement, repeated internet of like the action and the benefit that could come from it. So community building, community engagement relies also on like not just doing a one-time action, but into the continuous effort from like the operators of the platform, the operators of the game or services, or even like in case of Sandbox and others, the people who are launching experience on their land, to continuously engage with the audience that they are creating with relevant content that fit for them. What I like is like we do not need to be in a model where if you don't have like 1 million followers or fans, you do not exist, and the financial metrics cannot allow you to exist. Like 1 million people to have as a fan is not a community. A community is probably in a circle of 100 people to 10,000 people, more or less, that's been proven, which allow to have like more quality interaction and engagement. And 3D virtual world spaces like the metaverse allow to have like at the end of the day a more human relation, not just like, retweet, share or comment, but various interaction with avatars that derive from it. It's been very useful to empower artists, musicians, all sorts of creators to like make a living while also rewarding the users, the fans that's supporting them along the way. So those are like very concrete use cases that we've seen, specifically thinking about in a post-COVID area and during COVID where like they really had to turn around, like find new model because their core activity was very challenged at those point of time. And I believe like we're already seen like to some extent the speed of which crypto evolved, the limitation of like true very limited community interaction toward like the community that still holds today. Or thinking about Yuga Labs and the Borget Apes, there's still a few like blue chip communities that deliver value. Doodle, Cool Cat, Azuki, Borget Ape, Sandbox, hopefully, if people would agree. And keep building, keep delivering value, keep delivering utility, keep finding ways to engage them toward like a bigger purpose together that hook us and make us continue to be engaged.
Yeah. Well, I've certainly learned a lot about Web3 today, so thank you for all coming and sharing your expertise. If you could please thank Tian, Joonatan, Leo, and Sebastien.